This is the Behind the Line podcast, coming to you from the crazy, chaotic lines of the Pacific Northwest. And this is Pacific Northwest Headline News. Well, this right here is a small example of why Seattle is so screwed up. Not only do we have problems with crime and homelessness and open drug use and garbage and trash everywhere, we have a major problem with graffiti being tagged on buildings all over the city, windows, bus stops, just about anything that you can imagine gets tagged, and there's graffiti everywhere, and it's ugly. This graffiti also happens to be a lot of gang-related graffiti, Antifa-related graffiti, foul messages. And Seattle Council member Teresa Mosqueda thinks graffiti and Antifa tagging is unsolicited creative expression and art. She thinks cleaning it up is just a handout for profit graffiti removal businesses. This is from the Jason Rantz show, KTTH. The city of Seattle is inundated with graffiti, much coming from local gang members and Antifa thugs. It prompted a proposal by Mayor Bruce Harrell to implement a 6-point program to clean it up, which it needs to be. The program includes funding graffiti abatement and charging prolific taggers. There are clear problems with Harrell's plan, but Mosqueda expresses remarkably irresponsible and ignorant criticism. This is what she said on Twitter. Well, she said this was insightful remarks from Paul Nunn of Urban Artworks. Rather than taking a purely punitive approach to erasing graffiti from the urban landscape, Seattle could create an innovative policy environment that incentivizes investment in art and artists. People who run around tagging and scribbling on buildings and posts and electrical boxes and everything else are not artists, bud. And redirect resources to rapidly respond to truly detrimental vandalism. The narrative that painting over graffiti discourages new graffiti is perpetuated mainly by the for-profit graffiti removal businesses and is not based in research. The mindset of lumping all unsolicited creative expressions into criminal behavior while dumping taxpayer dollars into reactive abatement strategies needs to be reevaluated. Police do not arrest taggers, and they won't be booked. The Seattle Police Department is dangerously understaffed. More problematic, the Seattle City Attorney is unlikely to prioritize their prosecution, no matter how prolific. While cleaning up the gang symbols and other tagging helps make the city feel safer, without proper enforcement, painting over graffiti is extremely a short-term solution. The Bartell drugstore in Wallingford is routinely tagged by Antifa thugs who regularly smear cops on the building's exterior. Mosqueda isn't a fan of Harrell's program either, but she opposes it for laughable reasons. She sees nothing wrong with gang and Antifa graffiti. She endorsed what she thinks is insightful comment on graffiti abatement by Urban Artworks project director Paul Nunn. Nunn chastised the purely punitive approach to erasing graffiti from the urban landscape because he would rather incentivize what he's pretending is art. Indeed, he argues tagging is merely unsolicited creative expression and not truly detrimental vandalism. Tell that to businesses that are tagged with gang symbols and messages calling cops murderers. Businesses overwhelmed with graffiti often see fewer customers. No one wants to frequent a restaurant, for example, covered in gang signs. And it's not especially welcoming walking into a coffee shop tagged with ACAB at its entrance. Those businesses, many struggling to survive due to the area's crime surge, are burdened with the cost of cleaning it all up. Mosqueda doesn't seem to mind. Pretending that graffiti is merely harmless, unsolicited art is stunningly obtuse. Mosqueda wouldn't hold the position if she found a pro-life graffiti message on her property. Isn't that the truth? Like socialist Kshama Sawant calling the police, she tried to defund when poop was thrown at her home. Mosqueda would get the unsolicited art removed from her property within hours and would likely demand a police investigation. In fairness to Mosqueda, if her council office were tagged at City Hall, she wouldn't clean it up, not out of her principled stance against giving tax dollars to for-profit graffiti cleaners, of course. After all, Mosqueda doesn't go to the office to work. She's still using COVID rules to work from home in her pajamas. She wouldn't even see the tagging. Nevertheless, the graffiti that Harold seeks to clean up isn't art. Murals are art. Tagging gang signs express one's commitment to violence and intimidation. A left-wing equity movement informs Mosqueda and Nunn's positions. Taggers, whether or not in a gang, are typically youth. Progressives do not want to punish the youth because they think young people, especially racial minorities, are victims of a white supremacist criminal justice system. And they argue that entering the criminal justice system only leads to worse outcomes. Sometimes that's true. But activists like Mosqueda believe the criminal justice system is literally never the answer. It's what keeps dangerous, violent kids on the streets, reoffending. Punitive measures can stop a teen's criminal activity from escalating. Just a small example of the disconnect and stupidity in the Seattle City Council. Seattle Public Schools is planning a safety audit after a shooting that occurred at Ingram High School November 8th over a cell phone. One student shot another student in the back several times because the other student had stolen his cell phone. Students are planning walkouts. All this stuff is happening. Well, I just wonder, Seattle Public Schools made the brilliant decision to remove all the SROs and law enforcement from their schools after the whole George Floyd thing. And it makes you wonder, had an SRO still been at that school, if this would have even happened. But, of course, they're not going to talk about that, are they? Just days after Seattle Public School student was shot and killed inside his own high school building, fellow students are planning a walkout and demonstration demanding the district and elected leadership take drastic measures to ensure their safety. Classes at Ingram High School were canceled after the shooting on November 8th, and school remained closed all week. When students returned, organizers with Seattle Student Union expected a large response from students across the district to join in a demonstration at City Hall. In a public statement, Seattle Student Union said the victim shot and killed was 17 years old. Prosecutors say a 14-year-old boy planned his murder. He was arrested with a 15-year-old accused of helping him hide the gun. I think it has affected people's ability to focus over the past couple of days, said Chetin Soni, a student at Lincoln High School and from Seattle Student Union. Wednesday night, more SPS students spoke out during regular district board meeting, including some kids represented on the board. Supporting students to succeed and to thrive is by making sure that they stay alive in school. No kidding. At the meeting, new safety initiatives across the district aimed at campus safety were announced. They include a district-wide safety and security audit. Okay, that's going to do nothing. Let's talk about it. The gathering of a community action team. Nothing. And a child well-being council. Nothing. You've got to put physical security measures into these schools. I'm talking about metal detectors. I'm talking about bag checks. I'm talking about security people, armed security people, whether that's law enforcement or private security. It doesn't really matter, but that's what you've got to do. Having these little meetings and audits and community action teams and well-being councils, give me a break. That's going to do nothing. This requires more than talking about it. Sony says Tuesday's shooting will not be the last without immediate change. We are still in this perpetual cycle of having kids do adult jobs, he said. In addition to the district's safety initiative, both Seattle Police and Mayor Bruce Harrell say they have already been working on possibly returning school resource officers to campuses across the city. Some students say they are adamantly opposed to police in schools, saying some officers bully or even act violently. This is the messed up, confused world these kids live in. A 9-year-old child was shot in a road rage incident in Renton, According to the Washington State Patrol, it appears the drivers of two vehicles made contact with each other on State Route 167 approaching I-405. The two vehicles exited and wound up near Southwest Grady Way. The driver of the Dodge Durango got out and approached the dark blue Mustang involved. WSP said the driver of the blue Mustang shot toward the Durango and ended up shooting a child. Washington State Patrol said the child was hit in the mouth and upper chest. WSP said the driver of the blue Mustang sped off and police are searching for the vehicle. The child was taken to a hospital with life-threatening injuries. According to WSP, hospital officials say the child is in serious condition and is recovering in the intensive care unit. Detectives are still looking for the dark blue Mustang. WSP does not have a plate number, but says it's a convertible with white writing on the lower portion of the windshield. If you have any information that can help investigators, you should call the State Patrol. Why are you getting involved in a road rage incident with your child in the car? Why are you getting out of the vehicle and approaching somebody when your 9-year-old is sitting in your vehicle? Why are people shooting at other people over road rage incidents? What is wrong with people? I think it's about time to put Prozac in the water supply. Well, unlike the poor performance of Republicans in the state of Washington, Republicans in Oregon fared a little better. Surprisingly, Oregon lost its supermajority in its state houses, or the Democrats, I should say, lost their supermajority. And so Republicans did gain some seats. You even saw old Joanne Hardesty, Portland City Council member, be unseated, which I think is just amazing. That lady needed to go. But one very disappointing thing to see is Oregon Measure 114, which was a measure to change firearm ownership and purchase requirements. This requires permits to be issued by local law enforcement to buy any firearm. Requires photo ID, fingerprints, safety training, a criminal background check, and a fee payment to apply for a permit. It also prohibits manufacturing, importing, purchasing, selling, possessing, using, or transferring ammunition magazines capable of holding more than 10 rounds and makes violations of a Class A misdemeanor. This passed at 50.92%, 49.08% voted no. So it was close. But this 10-round thing, same thing that was passed in Washington, but it sounds like the permits to buy a firearm, this could make things a lot more difficult in Oregon to actually get a firearm. The permits will be issued by the Department of State Police. It doesn't say what the fee will be for that, but I'm guessing it'll be expensive. The Department of State Police are able to deny permits to applicants believed to be a danger to oneself or others if an applicant is prohibited from possessing a firearm. So, it could be used, depending on what sort of trouble you've been in, you could be eliminated from this, from being able to buy guns. 14 other states and Washington, D.C. have enacted permit-to-purchase laws that vary by type of license and firearm purchased. 9 states and Washington, D.C. have enacted laws banning magazines capable of holding a certain number of rounds. Yeah, they're coming after them, folks. They are coming after them. And Portland, like many other West Coast cities, blue cities, are struggling with rampant property crime, much of which is committed by homeless people. Thousands of property crimes in Portland are going unsolved with no punishment for the criminals that commit them. According to statistics from the Portland Police Bureau, burglaries, car thefts, and thefts of personal property, which are described as larceny, have increased each of the last 3 years. In 2021, PPB's Property Crimes Unit reviewed more than 5,000 reports of property crime, but only assigned 141 cases and made only 36 arrests. Portland Police Chief Chuck Lovell blamed continued staffing shortages and a spike in violent crimes for the low number of arrests. We have moved detectives from our property crimes investigations to investigate other things. Right now, a lot of our investigative resources are focused on gun violence, and some of that has come from property crimes, said Lovell. For victims of property crime, that reality is a tough pill to swallow. As a business owner, I just feel like we're not supported at all, said Rhonda Nienberg, who owns Hendricks McGuire Optical in downtown Portland. Yes, this is a story playing out in these big cities because these councils, these state government Democrats don't care about crime or your property. In fact, they've even said things like these homeless people need these things more than you, so it should be okay to steal from you. But overwhelmingly, this is what people voted for in Washington, Oregon, and California, was to maintain this status quo, to maintain this ongoing problem with crime and violence. Because I don't know why, because abortion was more important to people than crime and inflation and all this other stuff that's going on that Democrat policies are directly responsible for. And Portland, just like Seattle, a Jefferson High School student is at the hospital after being shot shortly after leaving school on Monday. According to the Portland Police Bureau, North Precinct officers were dispatched to a local hospital around 4:30 p.m. after receiving reports of a walk-in gunshot victim. PPB soon learned two 17-year-old students had just left the school and were driving near the intersection of North Killingsworth Street and North Haight Avenue around 3:30 p.m. when the occupants of another car drove by and fired several rounds at them, striking their car. Only one student was hit by gunfire in his shoulder. According to PPB, his injuries are not expected to be life-threatening. Shooting comes almost a month after a shooting outside of Jefferson High School that injured two students October 18th. How long are we going to allow this to go on? I guarantee you this is gang activity. So when are we going to allow the police to crack down on these gangs again? Most of these blue cities that experienced defunding have lost their gang units or undercover units that deal with gang problems, or they're severely crippled by funding or manpower shortages and aren't able to do their jobs. And whether you want to believe it or not, these cities, Seattle, Portland, we know California, but yes, cities in Washington and Oregon also have major gang problems. Portland, Salem, Seattle, Tacoma, Yakima, all these places. And maybe you think that's just fairy tales, but I've personally dealt with these gang issues, and it's gone on for years, and it's much, much worse than people believe or care to know about. Mexican gangs and Russian gangs, Asian gangs, they're all operating. And then just the standard old American, black gangs that operate, the Bloods and the Crips and all those, they're still around, folks. And they're much more organized than they were in the past. These kids in school are being recruited, especially in areas where kids are not being prosecuted, like Seattle, I would imagine, like Portland and cities in California, where they can commit crimes and aren't going to be charged as an adult, aren't going to go to any kind of custody. The gangs are actively recruiting kids. It's not a gun problem. It is a education problem, a family problem. We should be focusing on the root causes of why these kids want to join a gang. Well, as I've been saying and ranting for months about the homeless problems plaguing these blue West Coast Democrat cities where they don't seem to care about safety whatsoever. Well, Los Angeles, Tuesday night, 2 people, including a 9-year-old boy, are in critical condition after they were stabbed by a homeless man in what law enforcement is calling an unprovoked attack inside a Target in downtown Los Angeles. Following the stabbing spree, the suspect was shot and killed by the store's security guard. Good. The Los Angeles Police Department responded to a call near the intersection of 7th and Figueroa Streets Tuesday night. LAPD officials said the young boy and 25-year-old woman were both stabbed by the suspect. According to LAPD Chief Michael Moore, the suspect allegedly told the boy he was going to kill him. The boy tried to walk away, but the suspect stabbed the child in the back. LAPD does not believe the 2 stabbing victims are related to one another. The boy was at the store with his mother, who was not present at the time of the attack. This could happen anywhere, at any time, in any of these cities. These lunatic, out of their mind, drug-crazed, homeless people wandering into stores, getting weapons. And we've seen it time and time again. We've seen it in Seattle numerous times where they just randomly attack people. The guy that threw the nurse down the stairs to the light rail station twice. The guy that hit some woman he didn't know in the head, full swing with a baseball bat. In the middle of the day. We just had a guy stabbed to death by Pike Place Market in the middle of the day a couple months ago. These homeless people are just allowed to roam the streets and terrorize people. And not to mention the fact that most of these homeless people have a long rap sheet and have been in custody numerous times, should have still been in custody when they commit whatever heinous crime they end up committing. And yet nobody is responsible. City councils, mayors, prosecutors, judges. Nobody is responsible. When are we going to say enough of this? Also out of LA, a story that's still developing. 6:25 a.m. this morning, 25 law enforcement recruits for various agencies across Los Angeles County were injured, 5 critically, after a Honda CR-V going the wrong way plowed into them and hit a light pole during their morning run in Whittier. California Highway Patrol said the incident was reported at 6:25 a.m. near the intersection of Mills Avenue and Telegraph Road. Upon impact, firefighters with LA County Station 96 heard a loud crash and immediately rendered aid to the cadets and called for additional resources. The 22-year-old suspect was going southbound on Mills Avenue when he veered into the opposing lanes and struck the victims who were running northbound in formation. So he was tested for DUI and was not DUI. So this was absolutely on purpose. This guy saw these cops. The neighbors said they run by there every day. So he knew about it and decided to attack them and ran over 25 of them. 11 of them are in critical condition. This is the crazy-ass world we live in that, again, Democrat policies control. This is the kind of safety we can expect when we're out and about in our neighborhoods. 6:30 in the morning, middle of the day, it doesn't seem to matter. These lunatics are just allowed to be on the streets and do as they please. Again, when is enough enough? What do you suppose this guy's rap sheet's going to look like when they haven't released the guy's name yet, but guarantee you he's got some kind of rap sheet. He's known to law enforcement and probably just got out of jail and should have been in custody. And the same old story with every one of these cases. Have you had enough yet? Here's another crappy story out of California, and I'm just going to keep harping on these crimes, these murders, these violent crimes that are happening in these Democrat-controlled cities that they claim are so safe, and their policies are working by, gang members and homeless people and people who have committed crime after crime and are continued to allow to be on the streets. You need to know that this stuff is going on. This comes out of Merced, California. A 9-month-old boy was murdered in a drive-by shooting on Wednesday as his mother was pushing him down the sidewalk in a stroller. The horrific attack occurred in the 1200 block of Q Street shortly before 12:30 p.m. on November 9th, the Merced Police Department said in a press release later that night. The mother of 9-month-old Darius King Grigsby later told investigators she and her boyfriend were pushing her young son in a stroller when someone drove by them and fired at least 3 rounds in their direction. The woman and her boyfriend were not hit by the gunfire, but at least one of the rounds struck the baby, police said. Darius' mother rushed him to a nearby McDonald's restaurant at 13th and R Street and contacted police, according to the MPD. They arrived to find the baby suffering from a fatal gunshot wound. The department said Darius was pronounced dead at the scene. The gunman's identity was unknown, and no information about a potential suspect vehicle was immediately released. We don't know what the motive is, MPD Lieutenant Joseph Perez told the local news. At this point, it's possible that maybe one of the parents was a possible target and the child was just tragically caught in the crossfire. It's gang activity. And either one of those parents, probably the dad or the boyfriend, is in a gang, or somebody that lived near where they were walking is in a gang, and the house was the target of the shooting. I mean, who knows? But this is just the nutty crap. 12:30 in the afternoon, you're walking your kid, and your 9-month-old baby gets shot and killed. If this doesn't bother you, it should. We should be able to walk the streets with our children without having to worry about getting caught in some dumbass gang's crossfire, some crazy homeless guy's murder spree. This is nuts. These people need to be dealt with and punished accordingly and put away. Off the streets, kept away from everybody. They don't belong in society. These gangs need to be broke up and dispersed, arrested, deported, whatever needs to happen, needs to happen. We need to take a tough stance on this crime, these criminal organizations, these pathetic little gang members that run around and play their little Grand Theft Auto games with the rest of us. Again, have you had enough of this? And for those of you who somehow think that it's compassionate to leave these homeless people on the streets to fend for themselves when they're mentally incapable, out of their minds, drug addicted, everything else, just leave them be, let them live in their whatever encampments and whatever, that somehow that's compassionate. Here's a story out of San Diego, and I'm sure the same sort of thing plays out in all these major cities across the West Coast where we have massive homeless problems. Nearly 500 people living on the streets and in vehicles in San Diego County died so far this year and were examined by the medical examiner's office. According to data obtained by CBS 8, the county has averaged approximately 45 deaths per month since January of this year. It is only a small percentage of the actual number. The San Diego County Medical Examiner says the 499 deaths this year are those where the deceased person's housing status was made known to the office. In addition, the office says it only investigates 14% of all deaths countywide and only those that result from an injury, accident, or trauma. It does not, according to a spokesperson, include any persons experiencing homelessness that may have died of natural causes in hospitals or under other circumstances in which a community physician was able to complete a death certificate or was sealed for a police investigation. And while the medical examiners say the number of deaths of those living on the streets and in their vehicles represents only a fraction of the total number, the number is staggering. According to the data, the vast majority of deaths occurred, as would be expected, due to population size in the city of San Diego, followed by Oceanside, Chula Vista, El Cajon, and Escondido. Again, somehow the left view this as compassionate to allow these people to be left on the street. I've never seen the suffering, said McConnell. A lot of people have just given up. It's just a complete system-wide breakdown. We're seeing so many deaths because our homeless service system is just completely broken down. There are plans, but there's no strategy to implement those plans in order to alleviate the incredible amount of deaths and suffering on our streets. It's just desperation out here. No kidding. Hundreds of millions of dollars being spent in these cities to, quote-unquote, fix the homeless problem. And nothing gets done. Nothing actually gets fixed. This money is being abused and not used on homeless people the way it should be. And these people are just left to suffer and die, go crazy, kill other people, overdose, commit crimes, whatever. Complete chaos. And it's allowed. And these whack job lefties that try to prevent homeless sweeps and all these other things from being done seem to think that this is more compassionate to allow this suffering to continue. Suffering by the homeless and suffering by the victims of the homeless who commit crimes. When are we going to demand real change and accountability for all our tax money getting flushed down the toilet that's done absolutely nothing but exacerbate the problem? When are we going to wake up to the fact that these Democrat policies don't work? Thank you for listening to the Behind the Line podcast. For more, visit behindthelinepodcast.com. You can also find us on netnewsnetwork.net, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Telegram, Gab, Parler, and Truth Social. Please like, share, and subscribe.